Hey guys, so welcome to the video of volume 3 of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. As my other videos, this video is going to be full of spoilers. I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and giving you guys a summary of what has happened in volume 3. So if you don't want to hear what's gonna happen, you don't want spoilers, then this is not the video for you. But if you don't mind, then let's go ahead and get started. Part 1 of volume 3. It is 1812, and it is a pivotal moment in the book for Russia, for the war, for Napoleon, for everybody. It's as if the earth just pivoted a little bit and everything was off. Now it is 1812 and the war has arrived, has restarted, and has arrived on Russian soil. Emperor Napoleon and his troops have crossed the border, and they're there to attack and to take the capital. This is a pivotal moment, like I said, very transitional, because we're going from focusing on the individual people and their personal dramas to all of a sudden this national epic, and that is what it has become all of a sudden. It's quite extraordinary to see this change in the people. It is actually the first time in which Tolstoy has one of his essay chapters in which he actually backs up from the story, and he comes directly to us as the reader, and he's talking to us personally about his ideas on this war and history in general. He's very getting philosophical here, and he's talking directly to us. There's no stories, there's no characters, it's just reality. I really enjoyed that chapter. It was the first chapter of part 1. Tolstoy, he mentions, and I think it's very true, in general, when it comes to any historical event, war, battle, person, conversation, these things that happen in the world in which we talk about it hundreds, thousands of years later, we're asking ourselves, what happened to make this occur? What is it that made this person do what they did? He's talking right now about a specific moment, and that moment is in 1812 when Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte decided to cut with the peace treaty that he had with Russia and instead directly attack the Russians on their own soil and invade the capital, the older capital. But Tolstoy is saying, when you talk to historians, when you read the history books, there's always going to be an event. They're going to say it was for this reason that he did that, here for this or for that, and you're going to have people who have different opinions as to why it was this or why it was that. And Tolstoy is really trying to hone in and tell us that in general, but specifically this moment, was not a single cause. There was not one thing, but instead it was a series of interconnected events chained together, and a mixture of that plus chaos that brought us to where we are, which is 1812 and this invasion of Russia. I have to say that with this, I really agree with Tolstoy. I really do believe that in general, that is what happens, right? In life, I feel it's just so philosophical what he said and deep, that in general, it's hard to ever just say that something happened for one reason. I divorced this guy for this reason. I did this for that. I invaded Russia for this. It's usually many things coming together. sometimes it's just that last drop in the bucket, or sometimes it's just one moment of a lot of things coming at one time. But it doesn't matter, because the point that Tolstoy is trying to say is that there's not one reason, and kind of like it was gonna happen, and there's not really anything that we could have done about it. Tolstoy, he also challenges the conventional narrative of a great man. We have a character in this book that is well known as being one of the greatest men of all time, and that is Napoleon Bonaparte. He's not the first. There have been others before him, after him. What Tolstoy is trying to say is that these great men are not the cause of these big changes that we see in the world. They are just one of the things, one of the catalysts. And we cannot say that all of these problems between France and Russia and England and Austria is just because of Napoleon. If it wasn't Napoleon, it would have been something else. And that's what Tolstoy is trying to say. As we cannot have one single cause for anything, we cannot just put everything on one single great man. Let's go ahead and end that chapter with Tolstoy, with his essay, and let's get back into the story. In part one, there's a lot of things going on throughout this part, and we are going into the minds of many people, and we get a little bit more, we start to get more into the dramas of each person. But to be honest, when Napoleon comes and he invades Russia, all of those things dissolve, and they just become diluted and put to the back of the bus. Nobody is thinking about those things anymore. And so I could go into the details of all of these little dramatic things and everyone's little personal problems and issues, but I don't think it matters, not only for the reader, but also for each of the characters, because as soon as that happens, this invasion of their own country, of their own land, nothing matters anymore than their survival and what is happening. I have to say that this section, this point, is very chaotic, but you also get this sense of patriotism all of a sudden that wasn't so strong before, and this national spirit of like resistance. And it's very interesting to see the reaction of the Moscovites and the people who live in Moscow, because that is where we are for a lot of this part, is we're in Moscow. You notice that the people, they're really starting to talk more about their country and doing what they can for their country. They are not speaking a lot of French right now. It's actually can be dangerous to speak French out in public, is what was said. I also noticed, I don't know if it was on purpose or if maybe I'm just over noticing things, but throughout the entire book, whenever they referenced Alexander, they always referenced him as either the sovereign or the emperor of Russia. All of a sudden right now, people are calling him the Tsar. And I find that, I actually really love that, because the Tsar is like the Russian way of saying what Alexander is. But throughout the book, you know, while before this war on their land, they were using more European words like emperor and sovereign. Maybe I'm overthinking and noticing things that aren't there, but I think that that's what happened there. And if that is, then I thought that was interesting. This whole pivot within the people and within the story, where we were all individuals, and now all of a sudden the Russians are together and have become one. Personally, it's hard for me to relate, but I can think of actually one moment in my life where I felt something similar. Whether it was the same or not, I'll never know, because I am not living in 1812 Moscow. However, I was living in the US in 2001 when the World Trade Centers and the White House and the Pentagon got attacked by terrorists, and thousands of people died in one day by terrorist attacks, multiple terrorist attacks in one morning. And I remember in that moment, it was the only moment in my life I've ever felt in the US that we no longer were these little individuals going around. We all of a sudden at that moment melded into one, and we were unified, and we stood together. And it was so sad, but in retrospect, so beautiful to see that happen. I don't know if I can relate to what Tolstoy is saying and how this happened in Russia in 1812, and how there's so much more patriotism and this national spirit and they all came together. But I feel, at least for me personally, that would be the closest thing I've ever felt to that. This whole entire part, as I've been discussing, is really not about the personal individuals. It's really more about a nation as a whole. There's only one person that I would like to put apart and discuss, and that would be Napoleon Bonaparte. I don't know if Tolstoy is foreshadowing here. I think he probably is. We get this zoomed in narrative of Napoleon, and it's right in the midst of him crossing borders into Russia and attacking. Tolstoy, he really depicts Napoleon not really as a great man. There's so many historians that push the narrative of Napoleon being this great man. I have actually a book down here about Napoleon, and he is being portrayed as this great figure. Leo Tolstoy does not feel that way, and it's obvious. Whether who's right, who's wrong, it's not for me to put in my opinion on that. However, I will just note that Tolstoy really is trying to show his audience this side of Napoleon that is not great. And it's the same as him trying to show with war that, you know, there are many ideas that we have on war that just seem more romanticized. But when you come to it in real life, it's not as romantic as we put it to be in our brain. And he's showing that with Napoleon. Tolstoy is like pointing out the bad things about Napoleon, right? He's getting fat. He's not doing, he doesn't seem all there. He seems very disconnected from reality. And the way that he's prone to these anger attacks, and the way that he's like not really talking with people, but instead he's like talking at people. It just, he's really acting like a spoiled kid who's not getting what he wants, and he's just gonna keep on stomping his feet and coming up with excuses until he's able to get what he wants. Napoleon is just showing this complete lack of self-awareness. I mean, the way that he's having conversations with people, you can see that he just wants the people around him to agree with him and to be like, yeah, you're doing the right thing. It's right that we're attacking the Russians. He's getting upset, and you can tell that there's something in him that's not right. His leg is shaking constantly, and he keeps on like taking his snuff and like using it, and he's very prone to having like these anger moments of just all of a sudden getting so upset about something. I believe that Tolstoy finds it important to show this. We end part 1, and that is where we are at. So that's it, part 1. I'll get back with you with part 2 after I've read it. Volume 3, part 2. This is a very long part. It's, for my book, it was around 140 pages. I think it will depend on the translation that you get, how long it actually is. I have a lot of respect for this part because Tolstoy, he goes into a lot of detail, technical detail, into the Battle of Borodino. He's able to do this for us because he did the research. He actually went to the battlefield. He referenced a lot of what people, the officers and the soldiers and people who were there, what they said, how it happened. It's obvious that this battle and this part of the book he's very passionate about. He comes out of the story and he comes directly to us as the reader, and he really tells us about his ideas on what happened, getting into the technicalities of the battle. Personally, for me, it was one of the hardest parts for me to get through. It was really tedious for me personally. I don't really care for the battlefield technicalities. So to be honest, it was a drag, this part for me. But I do want to say that I appreciate the importance of this chapter, or this part. Tolstoy's passion for this battle is not singular. It's not just him that has this passion. It is a huge battle. In history, over 80,000, more or less, they say 80,000 people died in one day in this battle of Borodino. That is a huge amount of people. My husband went to Russia in 2012, which was exactly 200-year mark, and they were still having ceremonies to mark the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Borodino. And so if we're still talking about it 200 years later, part 2 takes place in 1812, and before we get to Borodino, we are following the French advancement. The French army, they are advancing inside into Russia towards Moscow. However, before we get to Borodino, there are some battles and things that happen beforehand that are very notable. One of them is this town Smolensk that they get to, and there's a battle that happens there. Near the end of it, during all the chaos of the battle, they start to notice that most of the houses are burning down and all of the land. And it's kind of chaotic, and they're like, well, what's going on? And then there's this realization that it was the people, the landowners, who did that to their own land and their own houses. They burnt down their own houses and their own land. And the reason for it was so that the French, they wouldn't be able to raid their land and their houses. This wasn't something planned. It just happened. It just happened that the people felt this way. Tolstoy talks about it actually a bit, how when you read in history now in retrospect, there are many historians who will talk about this burning of the lands and the houses as like a strategy, a military strategy of the Russian army. But that wasn't the case, actually. The way that Tolstoy is saying that this happened is that the people decided on their own that they didn't want their own land and their own houses to be used and raided by the invaders. That was actually a really big thing in history. And whenever you read about Borodino, and not just Borodino, but actually the entire campaign that Napoleon had in Russia, that was a big deal. It was that they were not able to use and exploit like the land, the food and hay and grains that was left by the Russians after they attacked the cities, that they were actually relying on, because it took a long time for their supplies to make their way into Russia, and they were not able to rely on that because this was happening. It was powerful. This symbolism is very powerful within the story, and for me personally, I really started to think about it. How many countries are there in which people would feel so strongly about their nation that they would burn their own house and land if they were getting invaded? That's a big sacrifice. That is the biggest. There's only one other bigger sacrifice, I think, and that would be sacrificing yourself. It made me think in myself, like, would I be willing to do such things if I were put in that place? And I don't know. Near Smolensk, there's actually the we go back into the story, and the fictionist Bald Hills is near Smolensk. Prince Andrei sends a letter to them, an emergency letter saying, you need to escape now, get away from Bald Hills. The French are very, very close, and they're going to, like, it's inevitable that they're going to take Bald Hills. Escape to Moscow now. Long story short, throughout this escape to Moscow, the old Prince Bolkonsky, he was already in bad health. He ends up having some strokes, and he passes away. He dies, and Princess Maria is pretty much left for herself with her helpers and her servants and serfs. During this moment, Tolstoy takes this opportunity to show us the disintegrating relationship between the serfs and their owners. I don't know if that's the correct terminology. It's a very interesting time for the serfs, I feel. You notice it specifically with Maria, Princess Maria. She is trying to escape, and she needs her serfs and her helpers to get all of the estate's furniture and things that are important, and get it all packed up, and get her horses too, and they need to escape immediately. There are actual technicalities as to why she can't do it. They're in the midst of a war and all of this burning of supplies, and a lot of the horses have died from starvation because there's not enough grain to feed them and hay. A lot of the serfs as well are dealing with the same starvation problems and lack of everything. And so Princess Maria wants to go, but she doesn't have the means to. They don't have enough horses. They don't have enough men. Everyone's just kind of chaotic right now and doesn't know what's happening. And so it's really difficult for her to get everything set up and get out. Also, she doesn't know, but the French army, they are taking advantage of the serfs. I guess that this was a strategy that they had, was to throw out these pamphlets into the cities before they attack them, telling the serfs, if you stay and you don't remove the food, you don't burn the food, and you keep everything and the land, we will take care of you. We're not going to arrest you or anything, and we're going to give you money. Actually, here's the money now. With the pamphlets, they gave them also money, saying that they were going to pay for all of this food in advance. The problem was that they didn't know, that we now know, is that this was all fake money. It was not even real money. And so this was all a ploy on the French military part in order to try and convince the serfs to help them out instead of their owners. This is what happens with Maria and her peasants. Maria she's not a bad person. Like, she doesn't think in this way of like trying to take advantage of others. And when she finds out that they don't have enough food and they're starving, she takes all of the grains that they have, and they end up having this scene in which they're all together and Maria's in front of them, and she says, I'm giving you guys all of my grain because whatever is mine is yours and you guys need it, and I'm not trying to do it in order to take advantage of you. I'm not trying to like convince you to do something. I just want this because I know that you guys, I'm taking care of you, and I think it's important that you guys have this because whatever's mine is yours. And I want you to know that I'm escaping to Moscow because it's dangerous to be here, and you don't need to stay here if you don't want. You can come with me to Moscow and I'll take care of you over there. The peasants, they already got that letter from the French, and it's already started this disintegration of their relationship. And so they see it as like this second option that they have, and they're going towards that instead. They immediately tell Princess Maria, we don't want your grains, we're not interested, and we don't want to work for you anymore. So, you know, she's in despair. She doesn't know what to do. Her helpers are slowly leaving her. She's not able to do it on her own, and she's pretty much stuck there against her own will. It just so happens that Nikolai Rostov, he is with his regiment and they're in the area. He ends up going through and he runs into Maria and finds out what's happening. He thinks it's wrong, very wrong what's happening here. He takes over and he makes sure he gets his regiment to go there and help her get out and escape. They get all of her furniture and all of her books and everything and that she needs, and herself. They get her all of the supplies that she needs in order to escape, and she goes because of Nikolai Rostov. There are these moments in which there is a connection between them, and obviously him saving her in a moment of despair, she really starts to have this really strong affection towards Nikolai, but it's the wrong moment. So it's not the time for love. They both think about it, and they're both it comes up in their head, this idea that they can see themselves marrying each other and this and that for whatever reason or the other. Maria sees it in a way of like, oh, he is a real gentleman, he's a real true man, and I can see myself loving him. Nikolai sees it as also like he felt a lot for her when he saw her in the situation, and he saw something in her that he liked about her personally. But he also knows that Princess Maria is very rich and his family does not have a lot of money, and it could be something that could also help out, and it's like the perfect situation for him. However, he is in love with Sonia, and so he kind of hints at like this whole like I could see myself with Princess Maria, but I don't know because Sonia. And so they don't go much into detail about it, and it's the wrong moment, but there's this little thing happening between Nikolai and Maria, and we'll see how that goes. The rest of part 2, we're really focusing on the Battle of Borodino. We first exit from the story, and Tolstoy, he's talking to us directly, and he's explaining about errors of historians. Maybe not errors is the correct word, maybe it's more like the subjectivity of historians. He talks about the Battle of Borodino and how the winner is going to be different depending on who is telling you the story. Tolstoy is trying to show us as the reader that in general, history is subjective. There really is no way that history can be objective, because it's not as simple as like I won, you lose. That's it. This is black, this is white. War is not so simple. Depending on the information you get and the way that you see things, even if you have the same information, it could just be the way that you perceive is just different. And he's showing you that through the Battle of Borodino. He's saying that if you read about it from historians who are more pro-Napoleon, they're going to say, well, obviously the French won this battle. Look at the numbers. 28,000 French who died, but how many Russians died? 44,000. But if you read about the Battle of Borodino from the Russian side, they're going to say, look, that it's not just about the Battle of Borodino, it's about what happened afterwards. This is a moral victory for Russia. I found this very important to read whenever you think about history. Do we really know this whole story? No, because we only know what we read. History is subjective. Unfortunately, there's no way to make it just simple facts. It's always going to be mixed with opinion and subjectivity. It's things like this why I'm so glad that I'm reading this book, because this is like, War and Peace is more than just a book. It is Tolstoy teaching you history and teaching you how to understand history and look at history in general. I kind of see Tolstoy as like my professor as I read this book. He is teaching me so many things about war and history and historians And I really appreciate this book so much for that. Tolstoy brings us back to the story, and we are now back with our fictional characters. We see a lot of Pierre and Andrei during this part. It's pretty sad. For both of them, they are going through inner turmoil within themselves. Prince Andrei, he has taken on the idea of pretty much how Leo Tolstoy preaches to us through this. This is Prince Andrei's like second war now, right? Because first he was in the Battle of Austerlitz, where he was helping. They were with the Austrians in Austria, and now he's doing this Battle of Borodino, where he's in Russia in his own land and territory. It's just so much more deeper, this war, this battle versus Austerlitz in the beginning. Andrei, he's taken on this fatalism, determinism. He's no longer, he's not interested in the strategies. He's not interested in helping them try to figure out how to get the better hand in this. He's come to his own realization that the battle is going to turn out how it's going to turn out. It is not about like this single event. It's about everything as a whole. And he can sit here as a singular person and try and put up some little mounds and things to help or like do things in order to help himself in the battle. But no matter what he does, he's just one little drop in the bucket, and it's going to turn out how it's going to turn out. And he really has this idea that it's the end, like he's going to die and that's going to be it. And he's just going through his mind of what's going to happen after he's gone. He's going to die after this, and Russia is going to change. And at first it's going to be a big change, and everything's going to be different, but then it will eventually become the normality, and he's not going to be a part of it. And it's just sad. He's like a dead man walking. He already thinks that he's going to die. He already thinks that everything is already set out and placed, and now it's just a matter of letting it happen. Very depressed Andrei right now. Pierre, on the other hand, poor Pierre. That is the theme of this whole book with Pierre. Is just poor Pierre. No matter what happens to him, every time we see him, there's just something weird going on with him. Pierre is undecided as to what to do, as he always has been throughout this whole book. Pierre has just been trying to figure out life. Now that the war is actually on their front doorstep, it's different for him. War for him has always just been a philosophical, romantic idea. It's been something that's always happened somewhere else over there. Now it's here. The French are there. They're destroying the lands that he's walked around and he's been to. You can hear the cannons. It's a different experience for him now. Throughout the whole book, he's always just been struggling to find his own place in the world, and he's always been an outcast. And this is the first time where he's not trying to like stay on the outside, right, and try to figure things out on his own. He actually wants to be a part of it. He wants to be a part of the collective, of this common calamity. He ends up traveling to the battlefield of Borodino like the night before it happens, and he's there dressed as a civilian. He sticks out like a sore thumb, as he always does, because that's the theme of Pierre here. Everyone's looking at him, they're laughing at him, making fun of him. What the heck is this guy doing here? Like, he's dressed in all white as a gentleman, and he's in the middle of a battlefield, right? And he's going around, people are like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm here, I'm trying to figure out what the strategy is. Can anybody tell me what's the strategy? How do we have everybody set up? He doesn't know what he's doing. He's walking around like an idiot, and you can just tell, like, he says he's trying to figure out what the strategy is. He thinks maybe if he figures out the strategy, he can do something. He ends up running into Prince Andrei, and Prince Andrei, in his little depressed, fatalistic mode, he's just like, you're wasting your time, Pierre. It's going to end up how it's going to end up. Don't even waste your time trying to figure out what the strategy is. Who cares? In the end, when the battle begins and it commences, Pierre is still in the middle of it, and he's running on his horse with all the army men going towards, and they're all still telling him, like, what are you doing? Go away. Like, why are you here? You're in the way. Move. And he doesn't, I don't know what's going on through Pierre's mind right now. He's so confused, and he wants to be a part of it, and he wants to be there, but he doesn't know what to do when he's there. And it's just so like Pierre to just all of a sudden show up in the middle of a battlefield, getting in everyone's way, not knowing what to do. I really feel for Pierre. I'm starting to think that he's one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character. I feel for him. He's just this outcast, and he feels left out. He feels like everyone understands, or everyone's going in a way, and they understand life or whatever it is, but he's not understanding it, and he's there just trying to figure out what it is, but he can't. We end this with Pierre just going around doing God knows what in the middle of the battlefield. Prince Andrei, unfortunately, he ends up getting fatally wounded. I don't think he's dead yet. I don't think so. But they keep talking about, like, he's definitely going to die. There's no way that he can survive this. I don't think it's looking good for Prince Andrei, but I guess we'll see. Anyways, that's it for part 2, volume 3. The only thing I have to say is that as difficult as this part was, and I'm sure it is difficult for a lot of people, unless you really like military tactics, this is a very important part, and we need to remember that this battle really happened in real life, and it is considered, even to this day, one of the most deadliest, bloodiest single battles in military history. 80,000 people died in one day, and it's a battle that we're still talking about 200 years later. And so I'll get back to you guys with part 3 when I get to it, of volume 3. Hey guys, so I'm going to be talking with you about part 3, volume 3 of War and Peace. I just finished. I'm just going to be honest, in my life right now, I had a really just traumatic experience. Had to have a lot of calls with police, and have had just a really weird situation. And so my mind is kind of in a weird place right now, and my description of this part might not be so good, because I don't really know how much I was really into it after everything happened. Volume 3, part 3 is right after the war of the Battle of Borodino, and the Russians have retreated. We start with this General Kutuzov, who is the general who needs to who needs to decide what's going to happen next. Like, are they going to have another battle to save Moscow, for Moscow, or what's going to happen next? Because the next place is going to be Moscow. Long story short, he decides to abandon Moscow with no fight, and this is because he believes that they need to save their army, and this, in the long run, in the outcome, the long term, will help them win this war against Napoleon. So he makes the hard decision to abandon Moscow, which is a huge deal, obviously. I mean, Moscow was the old capital of Russia, and we then get into some of the characters. We get into them, and not just that, we also have some chapters in which Tolstoy brings us back, and we're talking directly to him. Honestly, he's really just kind of pushing the same narrative that he was pushing before, about how it's not like just one man, and like historians, and how historians write things, and how it's subjective. And so and he gets really into the technical details of the reasons for Moscow not being defended and stuff. And I'm not going to get into that because I read that part actually pretty fast. It wasn't something that I felt necessary to really delve deep into, because I felt that he already delved into this so many times before. What I really liked about this part actually was, and this is the second part in the book in which I've cried. It was before the occupation, like the French had not yet arrived to Moscow, but everyone was evacuating, everyone was leaving, and it was really difficult. You're seeing these people who are leaving their everything, right? Their entire house and everything that they own, and they have to leave. And on top of that, they're abandoning their capital, their old capital. And it's difficult, but similar to with the other battles that took place in smaller cities around Russia, you see the Russians, the people, the average person, who are, without being told to, they're acting in this way that it seems to just be the theme of the Russian people, where it's I would rather see this burn down than it taken by force, by someone else who's not here for the good of us. And so you see them not leaving things for the French. They're removing everything. They're burning places are getting burned down. Tolstoy, he specifically says, look, we don't really know. We don't have proof whether this was the burning of Moscow, if it was staged, if it was if it was something that was planned, or if it was just an accident, or what. Nobody really knows. And so he doesn't really want to point fingers at why Moscow ended up burning. He thinks it's multiple things happened to make for the burning. There's 3 characters or groups of characters in which I think it's important to talk about here. The first one would be the Rostovs family. So that's a group here. In general, there's Rostovs, the family, the exodus, their escape from Moscow, because they're one of the last families to leave. It takes them a long time, and one of the reasons for this is that their house is getting near the end. There are a bunch of soldiers from Borodino who have been wounded, who are coming into Moscow, and then they have to escape too, and it's just a big mess. And it ended up that a lot of these wounded soldiers ended up being brought to the Rostovs estate to stay there momentarily, and they decide to let them, when they were asked, can we keep soldiers here, they said yes, it's fine. And if you remember, the Rostovs family is our family here, who aristocratic family that is on the verge of bankruptcy. And so it's really difficult for them, because the mother, she's trying to save all of the most expensive things and bring it out, because it is the heirlooms, and it's what they're going to give to their children. And if those things are lost, their children are going to end up with no monetary gains whatsoever when they pass. Whereas the husband, he's kind of more on the fence about things and not sure what to do, and he kind of really wants more to help some of the soldiers, because when it's time for them to leave Moscow, some of the soldiers have confronted him and asked, is there any space on your carriages for me so I can get out too? And then it ends up being a really beautiful part, and this is the part where I cried in, because these Rostov family don't have money, and they all know it. And in the end, they end up leaving all of their belongings in order to fill all of their carriages with wounded soldiers to get out. And it was very empathetic. It was really beautiful to see, because even for me personally, with the experience that I had, even though I haven't told you what it was, there's just some really selfish people out in this world now, a lot. And to see a family like this who are being so selfless at this moment. They're taking everything that's theirs and leaving it in order to help complete strangers. I just wish that there were more people like that. I cried during this before all that stuff happened to me, but it was really touching for me to see the Rostov's family and what happened. Another character is Prince Andrei. I think I mentioned, but in the Borodino, the Battle of Borodino, he ended up getting fatally wounded. He's not dead yet. He is actually one of those wounded soldiers that ends up in the Rostov estate, but he's completely passed out. So, and he doesn't know he's there. And but yeah, he's dying, and we get to when they're escaping Moscow. He finally wakes up, and Natasha eventually finds out that Prince Andrei is there with them. And there's these just really nice scenes between them where Prince Andrei, coming to this point of death, he's just really come to realize that love and hate are two different sides of the same coin, and that he feels that he's found this deeper meaning of love now that he finds love in his enemies. He finds love in Anatoly, who stole his fiance from him. He finds love in Natasha, which he ended up hating after everything happened. And so he's so happy to see Natasha, and he says, "I love you more now than I ever did." And and they seem to like have this connection right now because of all of this, but it's really sad because it's obvious that Prince Andrei is going to die any minute now. The doctors are saying it's going to happen, and there's like this little tiny bit of hope that maybe he'll survive, but I think it's pretty well written out that he's probably going to die. One of the biggest characters too that we're following here is Pierre, and again, poor Pierre. I really love him as a character. He's just he's so lost and he's trying to figure out himself, and he doesn't fit in anywhere. And like I said in part 2, he was in the Battle of Borodino, but just walking around like an idiot, like he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing. And now when everyone is leaving Moscow, he doesn't leave, he stays. And again, he's kind of like, you're getting in his mind, and he doesn't really know what he's gonna do. He just feels like he needs to be there. And he has these encounters in Moscow after the occupation, and while Moscow is burning, he has these encounters with French soldiers, with Russian peasants that are still, or people, Russian neighbors that are still there, even some other foreigners, like a group of Armenians. And it's interesting to see what's going through his head, and when in this time of chaos, how he's just really like unable to figure out what to do, and he ends up always in the middle of the drama. Long story short, he ends up getting taken prisoner by the French while he's there. At first, it doesn't seem like he will, because he's actually getting along with the French. I mean, like, he speaks really great French, and he doesn't really seem to be scared of them or have any feelings towards them. And so one of the French men actually really liked him and said that, "Oh, you're my friend," and this and that. But then in the end, he ended up attacking one of these French soldiers because he became aggressive with this woman, this Armenian woman, and Pierre defended her, and so he ended up getting taken prisoner. And so that's how we finish off part 3, the volume 3. I have to say, volume 3, really dramatic, really full of real history of things that really happened. It was just a lot. I'm gonna be honest, I'm almost at page 1000. I'm on page, like, I don't know, 940 or 950. And it's a lot. It's really a lot to get through. And so I've seen that volume 4 is a lot smaller, and I'm glad, because just to be brutally honest, this is quite a big book, and after a while, it gets kind of annoying when Tolstoy just keeps repeating the same thing in different ways, and it's kind of like kind of starting to feel a little bit tedious. But other than that, even though it is tedious and it is getting like this, I don't regret reading this at all. It's one of the best books I've ever read, and I'm learning so much from this book. And so I don't take that as like I'm not enjoying this reading experience. I am so much enjoying this reading experience. But just being honest, it's getting a little bit difficult with Tolstoy. Somebody needs to take his pen away. That's all I gotta say.